A dim white light illuminated the bright ballroom where Hope and Liam had just announced their engagement in what seemed like a perfect ceremony. Applause rang out, confetti rained down like colored memories, but amid the happy sounds, something was wrong. As everyone raised their glasses to celebrate, Hope noticed Liam avoiding her gaze, his eyes lost in some distant void, as if listening to the echoes of a memory he didn't want anyone to touch. His phone vibrated, blue light reflecting off Hope's wrist as she caught a glimpse of the words "FaceTime incoming," but Liam quickly turned it off. His face relaxed, the forced smile was restored, and the ceremony continued as if nothing had happened. At night, amid the yellow light on the wine glass, Hope stepped out onto the balcony. Carter stood there, the only friend sensitive enough to read her eyes, confusion, doubt, and fear of being cheated. A quick video call, a whisper in the wind, a fleeting glance. All of it began to burn into Hope's mind like fragments that could never be put back together. In her mind, the gorgeous engagement ceremony suddenly became a play, where every smile could be a lie. Liam, meanwhile, could not escape the guilt that weighed heavily on his chest. He remembered the days in the hospital, after the surgery that separated him from Kelly and Beth, the two daughters he had never given enough. The slow beat of the heart monitor reminded him that, while he was being saved, he had let his daughter's love fall into the void. Now, in the midst of Hope's seemingly new happiness, that guilt returned, clinging to him like a shadow. Every time he looked at Hope, he saw not only the woman he loved, but also a mirror reflecting all his unforgiven mistakes. And then everything fell apart. One morning, Hope opened her laptop to check the wedding guest list, but an anonymous email appeared in her inbox. The subject line was just 2 words: "Ask Luna." She opened it, only to find a blurry photo. Liam in a coffee shop, his head tilted close to a dark-haired woman.
Luna.
The unfamiliar name sent a chill down Hope's spine. She tried to deny it, tried to believe it was a misunderstanding, but when she asked Liam about Luna, he remained silent. The silence weighed more than any confession. Hope's world began to tilt. She went back to her call log and found a call with no record, no name, no location, just a series of unfamiliar numbers. She tried calling, but there was only breathing on the other end. Liam left the house that night, saying he needed time, but he didn't know Hope had followed. She saw him standing outside a small suburban hospital, talking to a young nurse. For a brief moment, Luna turned back, her hand on her stomach. The gesture made Hope's heart clench, and everything became clearer than any proof. Luna was pregnant. The cold night wind pierced her body like a knife. She didn't scream, didn't cry, just turned silently, letting her footsteps fade into the air thick with betrayal. When she returned, Hope sat in the middle of the living room, looking at the engagement ring under the dim yellow light. All the promises, all the memories condensed into a cold metal ring. Outside, the wind blew through the half-hanging wedding flowers, making them spin in the air like lost souls. Liam returned in silence, his eyes red. He knew she knew. No words, no proof, just a look was enough to make him collapse. The engagement was postponed. Hope was shattered. Love, once the bright light between them, now a fire that consumed them. Hope no longer believed in him, but what hurt her most wasn't the betrayal. It was the realization that she still loved him. She hated herself for still remembering his scent on her shirt, for her heart still racing whenever he walked into the room. Meanwhile, Liam tortured himself by trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. He went to the hospital, found Luna, asked for tests, begged for clarity. But fate never gave easy clarity to the guilty. Luna avoided him, saying it was too late, that the baby didn't need a father who only came when he was discovered. Liam returned, his hands shaking, and for the first time in his life, he felt afraid, not of losing Hope, but of himself. Meanwhile, Hope received a letter from Carter, a friend, someone who had loved her in silence. He wrote about how people sometimes betray each other not because they want to, but because they don't know how to face themselves. The letter brought Hope to tears, not because of Carter, but because she was carrying a secret, a recording, a FaceTime conversation she had never told anyone. A voice whispered, "I will never leave you, not in my dreams." And it wasn't Liam's voice. The truth made her understand that neither of them was innocent. They both lived in the gaps between love and betrayal, between trust and fear. When the wedding was canceled, the press began to spread the news. Social media was abuzz. Images of happiness were turned into evidence of a lie. Hope locked the door, turned off her phone, retreated from the glamorous world she once craved. Liam came to find her, but the door wouldn't open. He stood outside in the rain, watching the lights in her house dim, then disappear. They were now just shadows in the night, two souls floating between unfinished choices. In the rain, the thunder sounded like a verdict of fate. Can love survive the truth, or is truth the only thing left when love dies? At Forrester Creations, white light reflected off towering mirrors onto the catwalk where models walked like resplendent ghosts, carrying the spirit of the hope for the future collection. Each piece of fabric moving under the lights created a picture both beautiful and fragile, where every breath, every step could decide the future of the entire brand. Steffi stood still, her sharp eyes cutting through the space, observing every line, every smallest detail in the design that Hope had poured all her heart into. Ridge, standing next to her, was a symbol of restraint and power, who had yet to utter any comment, as if a nod or a word of criticism from him could decide the fate of all. The whole room was filled with tense silence, where Hope's pride hung on a thin line between recognition and defeat. When the show ended, time seemed to stand still. Hope felt her heart pounding in her chest, like a drumbeat before the final verdict. And then, Steffi smiled. Not the smile of a rival, but of a woman who had learned to bury her swords and choose the noble path. She congratulated Hope, congratulated her new vision, her boldness that she had never dared to admit she admired. In that moment, Hope felt liberated, as if the months of anxiety had been washed away. But there was something else in Steffi's eyes, the cold light of someone who had lost, and now was just waiting for a mistake to win it all back. When they were alone, the atmosphere became thick. Steffi talked about her happiness, about her engagement to Liam, the man who had been their deepest wound. Hope listened, trying to keep a smile, but deep in her mind, old memories still rose like damp shadows at the bottom of a well. Her love for Liam was more than just a feeling, it was a battle that required blood, tears, and honor. She wondered if Steffi's new happiness was truly a reconciliation or just another way to reclaim the land they had fought over for years. In that lavish world, peace was always a temporary concept, built on the crumbling remains of trust. In another corner, Remy walked in the cold, empty apartment, where the weak afternoon light filtering through the curtains reminded him of all that had been lost. He had hurt Deke, had made Electra Forrester collapse in a panic he had created. Now, in the silence of loneliness, Remy understood that every apology was meaningless without action. He began to write down each promise, each plan to win back the lost trust, but trust was not something that could be bought. It was a fragile flame. One breeze of doubt could extinguish it forever. While Remy tried to rebuild a broken love, Deke remained haunted. The images of Electra, the long nights of guilt and anger, left Deke unable to forgive, unable to forget. He looked at Remy as if looking into a distorted mirror reflecting his own fears. Fear of love, fear of loss, fear of betrayal again. Remy knew that the road ahead was not just a fight to win back love, but a journey to redeem her own soul. In Forrester, Hope watched Steffi leave, and in that moment, she realized that her relief was only temporary. Each of Steffi's compliments carried a hidden warning that with just one small mistake, everything she had built could collapse. Hope looked back at the empty stage where the models had walked proudly and felt empty. The gorgeous fabrics now lay quietly like corpses of flowers, a reminder that beauty only lives when seen and dies when forgotten. Ridge, a man of few words but a storm, approved the collection, but Hope saw wariness in his gaze. He had not forgotten the past, the internal wars, the hidden ambitions, the backstabbing wrapped in smiles. Steffi, despite her peace claims, was still as blood, still possessed the instincts of a ruler. When Beth Spencer expressed her desire to exclude Sheila Sharp from the wedding, Steffi understood. Sheila was a threat no one wanted to face, a wolf always trying to sneak into a lamb's feast. Steffi advised Hope to support her daughter, but deep down, she knew it was not just to protect Beth, it was to protect the Forrester legacy from an indelible stain. Her advice sounded benevolent, but it was actually a velvet-wrapped knife, a reminder that the Forresters never let outsiders take control. While Hope tries to keep her composure, Steffi walks away with a small smile, carrying something that Hope can't have, the confidence of someone who always stands in the central light. Remy, on the other side of the city, begins to carry out a plan to win Deke back. He sends letters, calls, appears in places Deke often goes, each time with pleading eyes. But Deke avoids, hides, as if just seeing Remy is seeing the old nightmare. Remy is exhausted, but does not stop. He believes that love, if strong enough, can erase all mistakes. But love can also be a knife that makes people commit suicide in the illusion of redemption. When night falls, Remy stands by the window, watching the city lights flicker like lost souls. He wonders if Deke still thinks of him, or if they all died in that anger. At Forrester, the light in the design room fades, leaving only Hope's shadow on the glass. She looked at herself, but the reflection was a stranger, a woman who no longer knew what she was fighting for love, for fame, or just to prove that she was not weaker than Steffi. The question hung in her mind like a wound that would never heal. Outside, the rain began to fall, seeping through the windows, blending with the tired breath of the city. And somewhere in the night, someone was watching, waiting for the moment when these magnificent walls would begin to crack. When the last light in the building went out, only a faint echo remained in the darkness, the question still unanswered. In a world where all beauty is a facade, who is truly worthy of salvation? White light poured down on the gallery like thin blades, slicing deep into the tense atmosphere where every breath was a confession. The smells of oil paint, wine, and human anxiety mingled into a bitter aroma. Among the walls covered with paintings, Electra stood tall, her eyes smoldering. Will watched her, not as a man watches his lover, but as a warrior watches a comrade ready for battle. He saw something proud, fierce, fragile, and dangerous in her, a soul that had been broken but now determined not to be trampled upon again. Remy entered, his face wet with tears, his fingers trembling, gripping the edge of the table, trying to find support in the world he had shattered. He spoke of change, of redemption, of Deke, the man who had made him realize the value of honesty. But the words dissolved into the air like smoke, meaningless under Electra's cold gaze. She was no longer the girl who had trembled when he had shouted at her. She was the storm that had weathered its first storm, who knew which trees the wind would topple and which would stand. When Remy cried, she felt no pity. She saw only the past clinging to the present. And she, with all the strength of her consciousness, cut it off. She said she would never forgive. That Remy had not only hurt her, but had tried to destroy the new life she had painstakingly built. In that moment, Deke, the one who had believed in Remy, the one who had thought he could save him, turned and walked away. Deke's footsteps echoed in the empty room, like the final judgment of justice. Remy followed, but the door was closed. All he was left with was his ragged breath and the cold silence of a world that no one believed in him anymore. Will walked over to Electra, put his hand on her shoulder, and without saying a word, looked deeply into her eyes, the look of someone who knew how many fires she had passed through to get here. He told her by his presence that she was not alone. Electra took a deep breath, and the fire in her eyes faded into a warm, comforting light. She knew, for now at least, she was free. As the gallery emptied, the lights dimmed, leaving them alone in the space like an unfinished picture frame. Will stood beside her, his gaze steady, as if to protect her from whatever darkness lurked outside. He told her that no one else mattered, that Remy or Luna could not touch what they had. Electra listened, but deep down, she was still afraid. She knew Remy would never disappear easily. He was the kind of man who, when pushed off the edge, would find any way to get back to the center, even if it meant dragging others down with him. And Luna, the woman who had broken the limits of morality, who was pregnant after hurting Will himself, was the trigger no one dared touch. Electra looked at Will, trying to read the truth in his eyes. She wanted to believe that he was hiding nothing, that their love was stronger than any lie. Will touched her hand, told her he was proud of her, that she was stronger than anyone he had ever known. In that moment, she believed him. But outside, Remy was wandering the night, streetlights trailing across his face like scars. He didn't know what he was looking for, forgiveness or a chance for revenge. Every step he took was a dangerous promise that he would return. And Luna, with a cold smile, sat in her high-rise apartment, one hand on her stomach, the other swiping through her phone, filled with unsent messages. She knew Remy would need an ally, and she was willing to play that role. Not for him, but for herself. Meanwhile, Electra and Will stood in the empty gallery where their love had been born, where all eyes were on them. Will told her that love was all that remained, that any storm would pass if they held hands. Electra nodded, tears glistening but not falling. She whispered in her mind that she was no longer a victim, that she believed in herself, and in Will. He kissed her, a kiss that was not only loving, but also a silent oath. A vow that nothing would ever separate them again. But in the darkness beyond the glass, someone was watching. A figure stood still, holding a phone, the light of the screen reflecting off Remy's face. He pursed his lips, his eyes filled with the venom of someone left behind. The scene closed like a painting, beautiful, but hidden in cracks. When the lights went out, all that remained was the soft breathing and the thick space between two souls in love. But what would become of that love when the past was not yet asleep? Would the oath under the yellow light be enough to withstand the secrets that were about to rise from the darkness? Or, in this seemingly peaceful moment, were they facing the final storm that no one could stop?